Hi everybody, I'm Ryan. Today we're going to talk about flex slots in what is sort of the agreed upon best deck in Pioneer, or at least the most popular deck in Pioneer, red-black mid-range. Now most of the deck is super set in stone. There's like some cards in the sideboard that come in and out, but this is mostly talking about main deck flex slots. And in the main deck, there are always 2 slots that can be a number of cards. Sometimes it can be 3 slots. The third slot can be created by cutting the second Kroxa, which some people do. But in those slots, you will need to select one of these cards. And these are most decks. So in those 2 flex slots, sometimes 3 flex slots, people play a 1 of Duress, up to 2 Misery Shadow, a 1 of Liliana of the Veil, the 1 of Archfiend of the Dross, which is kind of acts as like a 4th Shieldred that isn't legendary, which is kind of interesting, or the 3rd Reckoner Bankbuster. So I wanted to kind of go through all of these and talk about what would be the benefits of playing these cards in your flex slots. So one of the benefits of cutting Kroxa is that while it's very powerful, often it doesn't really contribute much to the board. So you kind of need that power for the late game in your deck, so you need at least 1. Some people are cutting the second one in order to have more impact in the early game. That's reasonably understandable. That being said, the 1 of Duress, people are playing it mostly because a lot of the decks that you play against Duress is like fine against. You know, there's not a lot of decks Duress is straight bad against in Pioneer, and there are more decks that Duress is very good against versus Duress is only fine against. And so people are playing Duress just as just an additional Thoughtseize, an additional way to kind of stop these Lotus Field decks, to be good against like mono green and things like that. And really, like, even in the mirror match, which you're definitely going to be siding it out, it can hit a Bankbuster or something like that in turn 1, which is just very good. Misery Shadow, the reason you would play Misery Shadow in the main deck is if you're expecting a bunch of mono green. Misery Shadow is very, very, very good against mono green because it means that your removal, which we'll talk about in just a minute because there are some options for removal, means that your removal exiles, which means Old Growth Troll isn't hitting a land. It means Cavalier of Thorns isn't grabbing something from the graveyard. And it means that once you're like reasonably deep in the game, turn 5 or 6, have 5 or 6 lands, you can be attacking with Misery Shadow, threaten a ton of damage, and then they can't really block because your guy can get bigger than theirs. So Misery Shadow is an extremely powerful card against mono green. It is only fine against everything else, and against some decks, it is just bad. And so it's important to keep that in mind that, like, you know, maybe Misery Shadow is okay against some decks, but you're mostly playing it for mono green. As far as Liliana of the Veil goes, Liliana of the Veil is just a pretty solid card. It's really versatile, being able to like discard and get rid of cards and make sure that you like can get to the late game. And it's just like having a removal spell on a stick is very powerful, and being able to get to top deck mode is really what this deck wants to do. This deck wants to be top decking with their opponent because the whole point of playing red black is the red black deck is playing more powerful cards than your opponent is. Also very good against like these combo decks that need to assemble some pieces, and like putting stress on their hands is really strong. Archfiend of the Dross, you know, being a 6/6 for 4 with flying, which that in and of itself, like we've known from the past, like with Desecration Demon and stuff like that, is just very, very powerful. The thing is, though, is it gets 4 oil counters at the beginning of your upkeep. You remove an oil counter. If it has no oil counters on it at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose the game. So there is a downside. Like once you play Archfiend of the Dross, if it is not removed, you need to be killing with it, which you do most of the time, but the downside's a little rough. Also, you have this, whenever a creature an opponent control dies, its controller loses 2 life, which puts even more stress on your opponent's life total. So it's another way to just like apply a lot of pressure, do a lot of stuff, make sure you kill as fast as possible. It's kind of awkward because, like, you know, it's not a Shieldred, right? It is most definitely not a Shieldred. If they have a way to not die, like they can just like let you die with the Archfiend. We're talking about Heartless Act in a second, but if they can Heartless Act something, that you just die with the Archfiend. And some people are playing Heartless Act now that people are playing Archfiend, possibly. So it's kind of weird. And then the 3rd Reckoner Bankbuster, you're deciding Bankbuster against slower decks. You mostly are playing it in the main deck for the mirror match. The mirror match is very, very powerful. Bankbuster is like being able to draw multiple cards, outcard your opponent. You know, if you're looking to 1-for-1 your opponent all the time, you need to be able to get card advantage in some way, and Bankbuster is that way against slower decks, again, mostly for the mirror match. Now, I mentioned there are only 2 flex slots, possibly 3, that you select from these cards. But also, I would consider the removal suite flex slots as well. Because there are 4 Fatal Push are always played, and then there are 4 places for 2 mana removal. 2 mana removal is normally chosen from this pile of cards. So you can up to 2 Go for the Throats. People are mostly only playing 1 Heartless Act if they play it. Up to 2 Infernal Grasp, up to 2 Power Word Kill, 1 Shieldred's Edict, 1 Dreadbore, 1 Abrade. So let's go through each one of these cards as well. You're going to pick 4 out of these for these removal suite flex slots. Go for the Throat. Great against everything except for artifact spells. I mean, there's really only one deck, and that's the Gearhulk Creativity deck that Go for the Throat's bad against. So that's something to keep in mind. Heartless Act is kind of an interesting one. The awkward part about Heartless Act is it's really, really bad against the Humans deck, but very good if you plan on playing against Archfiend of Dross. So if that Grixis deck pops up in your meta, Heartless Act might be a thought, but is really, really, really bad against Humans. And it's really important that our cards line up really well against Humans. Infernal Grasp, also very bad against aggressive decks, but though we are set up to beat aggressive decks reasonably well, but it has 0 drawbacks. It can just kill any creature. So that's something to think about. Is if you're not worried about your life total, not worried about aggressive decks, but don't want these drawbacks, don't want these things that some cards that can't kill stuff. It's just a thought for Infernal Grasp. Some people are starting to play it. 2 Power Word Kill. Obviously, the 2 major issues with this is 1, Power Word Kill does not kill Archfiend of Dross because Archfiend of Dross is a demon. It is really bad against the Angels deck, except against some of those 2 drops. And it does not kill Atrexa. So those are some major issues with Power Word Kill, but those are some pretty corner case decks, so I could see playing up to 2 of those. Shieldred's Edict is just like a more versatile, kind of a weird one, kind of like Heartless Act and Infernal Grasp, as far as like decks playing it, but it still like can be a very powerful thing. Can kind of almost end up being like an instant speed Dreadbore, you know, for Planeswalkers or whatever. Speaking of Dreadbore, again, unconditional removal, however, it's sorcery. You know, so that's a little bit of a concern. And then the one of Abrade, being able to take out, like in the mirror match, take out Bankbusters and like still have a removal on a stick and stuff like that is really powerful in the case of Abrade. So being able to play it as a 1-of can be really, really strong. But the thing about flex slots is you pick 2 of these, up to 3 if you plan on cutting the Kroxa, and 4 of these, and really the rest of the main deck totally makes itself. This is what I am playing. Currently, I'm playing the 1 of Duress and the 1 of Bankbuster because I want to be strong against those slower decks. And for my removal suite, I'm playing 2 Go for the Throat, 1 Power Word Kill, 1 Abrade. So that is where we are at with Red-Black Midrange. So if you like this video examining the flex slots and different cards you can play in Red-Black Midrange, the deck is pretty figured out at this point. You know, only having 2 flex slots and then having a conversation about removal means the deck is figuring itself out. If you like this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. Check me out on social medias. Links are above me and in the description. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.